Hello everyone, I am George.
Hi everyone, I am Amy. Today, we will be discussing, or better to say will highlight major differences among the doctrines used directly or indirectly in the Indian Constitution. These doctrines are: Doctrine of Pith and Substance, Doctrine of Colorable Legislation, Doctrine of Harmonious Construction, Doctrine of Incidental and Ancillary Powers, Doctrine of Repugnancy, Doctrine of Eclipse and Doctrine of Severability. George, I believe these doctrines are so closely related and linked that until you pay close attention to them, it is very difficult to differentiate them, as they appear same. So, for better clarification, we have made a table and major differences are discussed there.
However, before going through this video, we have prerequisites that we expect that you know the basic meaning of these doctrines as well as you also know. Schedule 7, which discusses Union List, Concurrent List, and State List. Article 13. Article 246 and Article 254 of the Indian Constitution.
Right, George. So, if any one of you have any confusion regarding these prerequisites, then we request you to first watch our exclusive videos that explaining these doctrines in detail. We have uploaded separate video on each of the doctrine that going to be discussed in this video. As you can see in this table, there are 7 doctrines. All these are defining distinct rules, but topic is same, therefore very confusing. So, George, can you describe this table?
Okay, Amy. The table horizontally has different doctrines and vertically extreme left defines the basis that clearly gives the distinct meaning of all these doctrines. The first basis is related to. It tells the schedule and articles, which are related to the doctrines. The second one is meaning. It tells the fundamental meaning of each doctrine. Through meaning, you can understand the differences. However, if you have still confusion, then you can check the next point, that is point to focus. This point clearly illustrates the major differences among all these 7 doctrines.
Right, George, I believe it is the most simplified form of explanation of these doctrines. And, the purpose of putting all these doctrines on one page is only to give you the picture in one go, so that you don't get any confusion.
So, if we check based on related to, almost each one seems similar as Doctrine of Pith and Substance is related to Schedule 7, which discusses about the 3 lists, namely Union List, Concurrent List and State List, and Article 246, which defines center and state relation. Similarly, Doctrine of Colorable Legislation, Doctrine of Harmonious Construction, and Doctrine of Incidental and Ancillary Powers are also related to Schedule 7. However, Doctrine of Repugnancy is related to Schedule 7 and Article 254. On the other hand, the last 2, namely Doctrine of Eclipse and Doctrine of Severability, are related to Article 13. Amy, would you like to describe the meaning of these doctrines?
Sure, George. Doctrine of Pith and Substance defines the true nature of the item legislated by state legislature or parliament. It means, if there is question that certain item legislated by any of the legislatures, central or state, whether it has jurisdiction on that matter or not, it is judiciary who decides it by using the doctrine of Pith and Substance. Secondly, Doctrine of Colorable Legislation describes, if the legislating body had no power to legislate directly, then the legislature cannot legislate indirectly either. It means, Parliament in no circumstance can make law on the subject listed in State List, and similarly State Legislature has no power to legislate the matter enlisted in Union List. Thirdly, Doctrine of Harmonious Construction simply tries to bring harmony between the Union List and the State List, which means, in order to avoid the inconsistency or repugnancy, any provision of statute should not be interpreted or constructed in isolation, but as a whole. Fourthly, Doctrine of Incidental and Ancillary Powers defines, If state government is making a law on the subject enlisted in state list, if any matter related to subject matter enlisted in state list, but actually does not belong to it, falls in the course by chance, then the state has given power to legislate on such incidental matter as well. Fifthly, Doctrine of Repugnancy defines: if there is any inconsistency or repugnancy between the law made by Parliament and state legislature, then the first one will prevail and the later one shall to the extent of the repugnancy be void. However, here you need to pay attention on the point that this doctrine will be used in the case of concurrent list exclusively. Sixth one, namely, Doctrine of Eclipse defines: if an existing law, which is inconsistent with a fundamental right, although becomes inactive automatically from the date of the Constitution's beginning, but not dead entirely. So, in future, if legislature amends fundamental right and conflict gets resolved, then eclipse also get vanished and hence that part again becomes operative. On the other hand, the seventh one, namely, Doctrine of Severability defines: if a specific provision in law or piece of legislation, which became void or inoperative, then the remaining part should be still valid. George, will you explain next and last point?
Sure, Annie. The last point, which is named as point to focus, let us check out. I repeat, please pay attention to this point because it is going to resolve your confusion. Firstly, the doctrine of pith and substance can be used only when either of the legislatures already trespassed into others' jurisdiction. Secondly, doctrine of colorable legislation is a guidelines or directives, hence, it restrains both the legislatures not trespass into each other's jurisdiction in any condition, neither directly nor indirectly in advance.
It means, George, the difference between doctrine pith and substance and colorable legislation is the wrongful act and time, first one used about after the act done and second one before the act.
Right, Tammy. Thirdly, doctrine of harmonious construction gives guidelines or directions to the judiciary to maintain the harmony between center and state through unbiased and harmonious interpretation.
It means, George, the doctrine of harmonious construction is for judiciary and not for either of the legislatures.
Yes, you are right, Tammy. Now come to fourth point. Doctrine of incidental and ancillary powers gives privilege to the legislature to legislate beyond its jurisdiction in a critical situation.
What is meaning of critical situation, George?
A critical situation means, as defined in its meaning, that if while legislating the law, the respective legislature finds that the subject which it is legislating though belongs to their list only, but some of the matter which is though related to the main subject by chance, but actually belongs to other list, in such a case, the respective legislature has been given power to legislate that matter as well.
Then, George, in this case, the legislature can make law on such ancillary matter, which is incidental in this case.
Wow, Annie, you used both the terms very nicely and correctly as well. Our next point is doctrine of repugnancy. This doctrine invalidates the state's legislation in a case when Parliament has also legislated on the same matter. Talking about concurrent list only.
It means, George, this doctrine, in most of the circumstance, gives much superior power to Parliament, as it states that if any subject enlisted in the concurrent list, regarding the same, if Parliament makes the law on it, then it does not matter that state has already made the law on that, rather center's legislated law will prevail. So, in other words, it does not matter, on the same subject, state has made law prior to Parliament or later, in any condition, Parliament will prevail.
Exactly, Annie. Now our next doctrine is Doctrine of Eclipse. It explains the status of the existing law, which became invalid because of conflicting with a fundamental right. And the last one, that is Doctrine of Severability, explains the status of the remaining part of the law, which is not in conflict with fundamental right.
It means, George, Doctrine of Eclipse talks about the status of conflicting part, which remains inoperative until the respective fundamental right not get amended. On the other hand, Doctrine of Severability focuses on the same provision, but the part which is not conflicting with fundamental right remains operative.
Yes, Ami, you are 100% correct.
Likewise, the whole concept including the content in table is created by our senior Mukesh Kumar. Hence, if you have any question or confusion, then you may ask us through the comment box given below. One point more, if any one of you want PDF of this table, you may email us at mplegalfirm@gmail.com.